So I wanted to go ahead and make this video about the Deltarune status update for 2023. Now normally this time of year I would go and read all the status update on stream, talk about it in the live chat, then predict how development is going when I think the chapters are going to release. However, this year we can't really do that because all we really got was 2 paragraphs and like an unused song. In comparison to last year, we got like 3 screenshots, 2 songs, the entirety of the Spamton sweepstakes, which was huge. Don't get me wrong, I'm not upset about this, especially because we're getting news like all year now, which as in comparison, we would have to wait a whole year just to get any form of update on the chapter and how things are progressing. I'm satisfied with how it is, but at the same time, I really think that Deltarune is in a very weird spot development-wise based on how things are going. So many people, when Chapter 2 came out, most people suspected that based on how Chapter 2 was the longest chapter in the entirety of the game, it had the most cutscenes, the most battles, the most dialogue, according to Toby Fox himself. So many people assume that Chapter 3 through 5, if he's releasing all 3 chapters at once, you can totally see that happening this year. The majority of the people predicted 2023, and even myself, I went on and I looked at the different status updates. My realistic prediction is 2023, but my optimistic prediction is 2022. But obviously that was an optimistic prediction, so that wasn't really like my real prediction, but my realistic prediction was 2023. And here we are, and they're just now wrapping up Deltarune Chapter 3, and I think a lot of people are a little bit upset about it because throughout every newsletter so far that we've received throughout the entirety of this year, it has been Chapter 3 is almost done, Chapter 3 is almost done, we're almost done with Chapter 3. Every newsletter has implied that Chapter 3 is at the very end of development. And even now, in the autumn newsletter, here we are again, continuing work on Chapter 3. That's why I think people are mainly upset about this. You know, I can understand rightfully so, because comparison to last year, I feel like they could have done a little bit more with the anniversary. I think I'm not upset about it because, you know, again, we got stuff all year now, but if they're developing Chapter 3 through 5, they could have shown off some stuff from like Chapter 5. We haven't seen an ounce of content from Chapter 5. We've seen content from Chapter 4, and we've seen a lot of content from Chapter 3, but we have nothing. We have no details on the development of Chapter 5. Like, we know Chapter 3 is almost done with development, but how far along is Chapter 4? And we really want to know, like, where's Chapter 5 is, you know? Which is why I wanted to make this video, because I'm starting to think that if Toby is going to release Chapter 3 through 5 at once, I don't see Chapter 3 through 5 releasing this year or next year, and possibly even 2025. If Chapter 3 is taking, at this point, longer than Chapter 2 to develop, then I think it's highly likely that Chapter 4 and 5 might be in a similar situation, where at this point, yeah, the development might be a lot smoother, but it's also going to take a lot longer per chapter for some reason. I guess these chapters are a little bit more complex or something. I don't know. It's just confusing on where the game is at the moment. My realistic prediction for all 3 chapters dropping at once is 2026. Maybe even 2027. And, you know, this is a pretty big problem because we're gonna be content starved longer than Chapter 2. And, like, I don't want them to rush the chapters. I would rather have a super high quality game rather than a rushed one. We don't want to have Deltarune filled with a bunch of bugs and glitches that, you know, speedrunners can use. But in the casual experience, we don't want it to end up like SpongeBob Rehydrated, where you find a bug in every single casual playthrough you play, you know? So obviously taking your time on things is a lot better. In my opinion, now this is optimistic, doesn't it feel weird that they're primarily focusing on Chapter 3 all of a sudden? Go back to like Chapter 2. When Chapter 2 was released, go from the release of Chapter 2 into the status update of late 2022. It was heavily implied that they were focusing on all the chapters simultaneously. And then for some reason, at the beginning of this year, they started focusing on Chapter 3 primarily, and they threw parts of the team to Chapter 4 and 5 to get that going. or, you know, specifically bullet patterns and stuff. But just the way that like they're focusing on chapter 3 leads me to believe, now this is again very optimistic, that Toby is changing his plans again, and that chapter 3 is going to release on its own. Easily massive cope. I know it's massive cope. You don't have to tell me in the comments. It's weird to me because I can't see them sitting on a fully complete chapter. Like, chapter 3 is probably going to be done by the end of this year, right? And hell, if this newsletter is written like a month before, like every other newsletter he's released, this development progress for chapter 3 is based on like maybe like the end of July, early August, you know? So it is pretty realistic that Deltarune's 5th anniversary is coming up on October 31st. My prediction and my theory on this, Deltarune Chapter 3 minus 4 and 5 could easily be released by October 31st. That could be realistic. If it's just chapter 3 alone, I don't see them releasing 3 chapters on October 31st, but I can see them releasing just chapter 3 alone by October 31st. I can 100% see that. The problem is that that's obviously not the plan. Again, this is massive cope. He said, hey, we're gonna release 3 through 5 at once and then change plans. I think that could easily be realistic because again, Toby has changed his plans in the past. Like, remember, the original plan was to release every chapter at once. That was the original plan. Can you imagine chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7 all releasing at once? Can you imagine that? How massive of a game that would be? That would be huge. I think it can be realistic that it's gonna be 1 chapter. After the announcement of like chapter 3 through 5, many people actually gave a lot of criticism towards that. And they were like, we had to complete chapter 2 and it was like a 6-hour long chapter and we had to complete it fast to avoid spoilers and take everything in. I had to beat chapter 2 in a single night and I played for like 6 hours just so I could avoid spoilers and continue on with my life. And then I also had to take it all in. Like, taking all of chapter 2 in took weeks. I don't think you all understand that. Y'all seen like my earlier theories on like Deltarune Chapter 2 and how most of them are pretty bad. And the reasoning they're all pretty bad is because I still, at that time, I didn't fully take in chapter 2 yet. I didn't digest chapter 2 yet. By the time I was making those theories, I only played through chapter 2 once. So having 3 chapters on that? Genuinely not good. I think the issue here is that payment. Not that they have funds, but how they're going to release the chapters. If they're going to release 3 through 5 at once, you're going to be paying through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's going to be like, what? $50-ish. I could see that being worth like $50 if I'm being completely honest with you. Because Undertale's like $10. I can see all of that being like 50, maybe 45. But like if you release chapter 3 by itself without 4 and 5, it would feel weird paying for all that money for chapter 1 through 5, but you don't get chapter 4 and 5 yet. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's the main issue. And I think that's why they want to release chapter 3 through 5 all at once. They have to take that into consideration. Just with the massive amount of criticism that came from the announcement that they're releasing chapter 3 and 5 all at once, I think they easily can just change plans. Because again, Toby's like the person that wants to have this game out more than anyone else. I mean, he said it himself. He had dialogue for chapter 1 written back in 2012, and I can see why he wants this game out more than anyone else. Even releasing 1 chapter a year, that can hold us over until the next chapter release, because that's consistently releasing new content like every couple of years. I think a lot of people would be fine if chapter 3 released this year and then we get chapter 4 on like Undertale's 10-year anniversary. I can see that also being extremely realistic. They have teams working on chapter 4 and 5 at the moment alongside the development of chapter 3, even if it's not that large of a team as the people working on chapter 3. They're still developing chapter 4 and 5 with bullets, gimmicks, stuff like that. I can see chapter 3 releasing this year for Deltarune's 5-year anniversary, because I don't see them releasing a chapter next year. Deltarune's in just a weird development slot right now. I'm very curious as to what you all think about this, because like I feel like this is kept vague on purpose, this newsletter.